Olá, pessoal, tudo bem? Seja muito bem-vindo ao Inglês de Verdade, o canal onde você aprende inglês de forma prática e real. No vídeo de hoje, você vai encarar um desafio rápido de listening, um pequeno podcast em inglês para testar de verdade a sua compreensão. Depois de ouvir, você vai responder 5 perguntas sobre o que foi dito, uma forma simples e eficaz de descobrir como está o seu inglês hoje. Além de treinar o listening, você também vai aprender novas palavras e expressões em inglês, tudo dentro de um contexto natural. E se quiser uma ajudinha extra, é só ativar a legenda em inglês disponível aqui no vídeo. Então, ajuste o volume, foque no áudio e vamos começar!
Imagine a world where you never have to close your eyes. You finish your work for the day, you eat dinner, you watch a movie, and you look at the clock, and it's, say, 11 p.m. Usually, this is when you start yawning, right?
Yeah.
Your eyes get heavy. You feel like you need to lie down. But in this world, you feel perfectly fine. You have 8 full hours before the sun comes up, and you have 0 need to sleep. You're just awake forever. What would you do with all that time?
That is the ultimate what-if question, isn't it?
Yeah.
It sounds like a dream come true for anyone who feels like there just aren't enough hours in the day.
It really does. I did some quick math before we started today. If you live to be 90 years old, you spend about 30 of those years sleeping.
30 years.
30 years. That's a third of your entire life just lying in bed, unconscious.
When you put it that way, it sounds like a tragedy. We're losing this huge chunk of our existence to, what, a blank state?
Exactly. So the idea of waking up and never needing to sleep again feels like gaining a superpower.
Yeah.
I immediately think about all the things I could do. I could learn 3 new languages. I could finally write that book.
Or just play video games all night without feeling guilty.
Yes. It feels like the ultimate productivity hack.
It is a very, very tempting fantasy. But today, we're going to look a little closer at this idea. We're going to explore what would actually happen if human beings stopped sleeping. And I have to warn you, the reality is not as fun as the fantasy.
I had a feeling you were going to say that. You're here to ruin my dream of unlimited free time, aren't you?
Not to ruin it, but maybe to complicate it. Because when we look at the biology and the sociology of a world without sleep, the picture changes. It stops looking like a superhero movie and starts looking a bit more like a horror story.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because I think most of us, myself included, have a very simple idea of what sleep is. We think of the body like a car. You park it in the garage at night, you turn off the engine, and nothing happens until morning. It's just waiting.
That's the most common myth about sleep, that it's passive, that it's just downtime. But the research shows that sleep is actually an incredibly active process. In fact, your brain is doing some of its most important work while you're unconscious.
So if we stop sleeping, we're not just gaining time, we're stopping that work from happening.
Exactly. Let's start with the brain itself. There's a concept called synaptic homeostasis.
Okay, that sounds complicated.
It sounds complicated, but it's actually quite simple.
Break it down for us.
Think about your day today. You woke up, you brushed your teeth, you drove here, you talked to people, you read the news. Every single thing you did created a connection in your brain. A synapse fired.
So my brain is just collecting information all day long.
Right. And by the end of the day, your brain is, well, it's noisy, it's cluttered. It's like a computer browser with 1,000 tabs open. And most of those tabs are useless.
Oh.
You don't need to remember the color of the shirt the barista was wearing this morning. You don't need to remember every single car you passed on the highway.
I see. So my brain is full of junk data by 11 p.m.
Precisely. And this is where sleep comes in, specifically deep sleep. When you sleep, your brain goes through a pruning process. It reviews all those connections. It strengthens the important memories, like a new skill you learned. And it deletes the noise.
It closes the useless tabs.
It closes the useless tabs. That is a perfect analogy. Now, imagine our world where we don't sleep. That cleaning crew never shows up.
The office would get messy very, very quickly.
It would be a disaster. Even if we could take a magic pill that stopped us from feeling tired, our brains still have limits. We can't just store information forever. Without that nightly pruning process, we'd suffer from mental overload.
I can imagine that. You know that feeling when you've been studying for hours and you just can't fit one more fact into your head?
Yes. Now imagine that feeling never goes away.
Oh.
Your brain would be so full of noise that you couldn't focus. You'd likely start having memory failures. You wouldn't be able to learn new things because there's just no space left.
So instead of being a super genius who speaks 10 languages, I might actually become less intelligent because my brain is clogged.
That's very likely, and it gets worse.
Oh, great.
There's another system in the brain called the glymphatic system. This was a huge discovery in neuroscience.
I've heard of the lymphatic system, which cleans the body.
Yeah.
Is this the same thing but for the brain?
Correct. And here's the fascinating part. When you enter deep sleep, your brain cells physically shrink.
My brain cells shrink. That sounds dangerous.
They get smaller by about 60%. But it's actually essential. When the cells shrink, it creates space between them. Then cerebrospinal fluid rushes in like a power washer and flushes out biological toxins that built up while you were awake.
So being awake actually creates toxic waste in my brain.
Yes, wakefulness causes a buildup of proteins like beta amyloid, and high levels of that protein are linked to Alzheimer's disease.
Wow. So sleep is literally washing my brain clean.
It is. It's the only time the brain can do this deep cleaning. If we stopped sleeping, we'd just be stewing in those toxins. Even if we didn't feel sleepy, our brains would physically deteriorate. We'd likely see a massive rise in dementia and permanent brain damage, probably at a very young age.
That is a terrifying image. We think we're machines that just need fuel, but we're biological organisms that need maintenance.
Right.
And if you skip the maintenance, the machine breaks.
Exactly. So biologically, the superpower of not sleeping would probably kill us, or at least ruin our minds. But let's put biology aside for a moment. Let's pretend we solve that problem. We have a pill that cleans the brain for us, so we're healthy and awake 24 hours a day.
Okay, so we're physically fine. What happens to the world? What happens to society?
This is where the discussion shifts from science to sociology. And honestly, this part is just as scary. Think about how our world is structured right now. Everything is based on the cycle of day and night.
Right. We have business hours. We have rush hour. We have prime time TV. We say good morning and good night.
All of that relies on the fact that humans need to sleep. We all agree to be awake at roughly the same time, and we agree to rest at roughly the same time. This creates synchronization.
A shared rhythm.
A shared rhythm, exactly. We're all moving together.
And if nobody sleeps, that rhythm just disappears.
Completely. Imagine a city that truly never stops. And I don't mean a city like New York where you can get a slice of pizza at 2 a.m. I mean a city where banks, schools, construction sites, and offices are fully active 24/7.
At first, that sounds kind of cool. No more traffic jams because everyone is driving at different times. No more crowded grocery stores.
But think about the social cost. If you don't need to sleep, why should you stop working at 5 p.m.? Why should you wait until Monday to answer an email?
Oh, I see. The boundary between work and life would just vanish.
The whole concept of the workday would disappear. Companies would want to maximize productivity. If you can work 24 hours, the pressure to work more would be immense.
We already live in a hustle culture. I can't imagine if biology didn't force us to stop.
Exactly. Sleep is basically the only thing that forces us to put our phones away. It's the only excuse we have to not be productive.
It's the ultimate pause button.
Yes. And if we remove it, we might find ourselves in a world of constant, nonstop labor. And this leads to a very interesting prediction about inequality.
How does this affect inequality?
Well, imagine a world where the working class is expected to be productive all the time. In that world, rest becomes a luxury item. Only the rich could afford to disconnect. Only the wealthy would pay for dark rooms or silence retreats.
That's so ironic. Historically, leisure was for the rich. Then everyone got at least some leisure because everyone had to sleep. And now you're saying that in a sleepless world, rest becomes a status symbol again.
It creates a class divide of rest, the people who can afford to stop versus the people who have to keep going. It would fundamentally break the social contract we have now.
And it would be lonely, wouldn't it?
Extremely lonely. Think about your relationships. When do you connect with your family or your friends?
Usually in the evenings. You know, we have dinner, we relax on the couch, we get ready for bed.
Those are shared rituals. They happen because we're all winding down at the same time. But in this new world, everyone's on a different schedule. You might be working while your partner is relaxing. You might be out with friends while your children are at school at 3 a.m.
We'd be like ships passing in the night. We'd be productive, maybe, but we'd lose those moments of connection.
We would lose the synchronization that holds communities together. We'd be living in the same house, but in completely different time zones.
So we have a brain that's full of toxins and a society that's lonely and overworked. Is there any other bad news?
There is one more major area we need to discuss, and this one is about our emotions. It's about what makes us feel human.
The emotional cost.
Yes. We need to talk about dreams.
Now, I've always thought of dreams as just entertainment. They're just weird movies my brain plays while I'm asleep.
Mhm.
But are they actually useful?
They are incredibly useful. The leading theory is that REM sleep, that's the stage where we dream acts as a form of nocturnal therapy.
Therapy, how did that work?
Think about a time you had a really bad day. Maybe you had a fight with a friend or you made a mistake at work. In the moment, you feel terrible.
Oh, absolutely.
You feel angry or sad or anxious. The emotion is very raw. You feel it in your stomach.
Right.
But then you go to sleep. And when you wake up the next morning, the facts are still the same. The fight still happened, but the feeling is different.
That's true. It's less intense.
It doesn't hurt as much. Things always look better in the morning.
Yeah.
That isn't magic. That is REM sleep. During dreaming, your brain reprocesses those difficult memories. But here's the key. It shuts down the stress chemicals in your brain while it does it. It lets you review the memory in a safe, calm environment.
So it separates the memory from the pain.
Exactly. It strips the bitter emotional rind off the fruit, so you can keep the lesson without the pain. If we stopped sleeping and stopped dreaming, we would lose that process.
So we just carry that raw pain forever.
We'd likely become chronically triggered. Our anxiety, our stress, our anger would just build up and up. We would never get that emotional reset.
We would be a planet of people who are constantly on edge.
Think about how snappy you get when you're tired. Now imagine being that way all the time.
Wow.
Sleep regulates our emotional stability. Without it, we might be smart and we might be awake, but we would be emotional wrecks.
And what about creativity? I've heard that dreams help with ideas.
They definitely do. There's something called the incubation effect. When you're awake, your brain is very logical. It goes from point A to point B. It's focused.
Right. I'm trying to solve a specific problem.
But when you dream, logic turns off. Your brain starts making wild, bizarre connections. It connects point A to point Z. It mixes things that just don't belong together.
And sometimes those weird connections result in a great idea.
Exactly. I mean, think about how many songs or paintings or scientific discoveries came from a dream. The periodic table came to Mendeleev in a dream.
I've heard that. And the melody for Yesterday came to Paul McCartney in a dream.
That's right. So if we don't sleep, we lose that chaotic, creative playground. We become very linear.
So we'd be efficient at doing tasks, but terrible at thinking of new ideas.
Our culture would become, as one researcher put it, sterile. We would be great robots, but terrible artists.
This whole conversation has really flipped my perspective. We started by saying sleep is a waste of time. I wanted to get rid of it to be more productive.
And now?
Now I realize that sleep is actually what protects us. It protects our brains from damage, it protects our society from chaos, and it protects our minds from emotional burnout.
It's the foundation of everything. We often treat sleep like an obstacle. We say things like, I'll sleep when I'm dead. We treat it like a weakness.
But actually, it's a strength. It's the maintenance system that keeps the machine running.
It is. And I think there's a deeper philosophical point here. We live in a world that is obsessed with doing. We're always buying, selling, posting, working, creating. We measure our value by what we produce.
And sleep is the only time we produce nothing.
Exactly. It's the only time we are just being. We're not consumers, we're not workers, we're just biological creatures existing. In a way, sleep is an act of rebellion against a world that wants us to work 24/7.
It's a beautiful way to think about it. Sleep isn't checking out. It's checking in with your own biology and your humanity.
Yes. It is the pause that gives the music its meaning. Without the silence, music is just noise.
So practically speaking, what does this mean for us? Obviously, we can't stop sleeping, but how should this change how we view our bedtime tonight?
I think we need to stop viewing sleep as something we have to do and start seeing it something we get to do. It's an active investment in yourself.
So when I go to bed tonight, I'm not wasting time. I'm sending in the cleaning crew. I'm sending in the therapists. I'm sending in the artists.
Precisely, and we need to defend that time. If you cut your sleep short to watch one more episode of a show or to scroll through social media, you are literally stealing from your own brain.
You're sabotaging your own emotional health for the next day.
You are. We need to respect the biological need for the pause.
This has been such a fascinating deep dive. We went from a sci-fi fantasy about a superpower to a deep look at how our own minds work.
It's a reminder that, sometimes nature knows best. We try to hack our biology, we try to optimize everything, but sometimes the system is already optimized. We sleep for a reason.
I want to leave our listeners with a thought to chew on. We spent this whole episode talking about a hypothetical world where people turn themselves into machines that never stop. But just take a look around you. Look at your schedule. Look at how glued we are to our phones.
We're already trying to get there, aren't we?
We really are.
Yeah.
So the question is, if sleep is the main thing that keeps us human by forcing us to pause and reset, does our current war on sleep mean we're already trying to erase our own humanity? Are we trying to become the machines we're so afraid of?
That is a very heavy question to think about in the dark tonight.
I think so too. We hope this deep dive gave you a new appreciation for that third of your life you spend with your eyes closed. It's not wasted time. It's the most important work you do. Thanks for listening.
Sleep well, everyone.
See you next time.
E aí, como você se saiu nesse desafio de listening? Conseguiu entender as ideias principais? Independentemente do resultado, o mais importante é praticar com constância. Cada áudio ouvido é um passo a mais rumo à fluência. Se você gostou desse formato de podcast e quer continuar melhorando seu inglês de forma prática, deixe seu like, compartilhe este vídeo e se inscreva no canal Inglês de Verdade para não perder os próximos desafios. Continue treinando, volte a ouvir o áudio se precisar e nos vemos no próximo vídeo. Até lá! Keep practicing!